there's a couple 100,000 people on my website. What can we do? And they just said nothing. We can just keep doing what we've been doing, and it's going to happen in the time that it's going to happen. You're not able to push the tolerance as much, because if you get to a certain point, the wood will just split. You can get really wrapped up in designing inside of your computer, and the physics of actual real objects don't translate at all inside of design software. That really freaked me out, because I thought it was perfect. If I had known how difficult it was going to be, or if someone told me, I wouldn't have started at all. This only could have happened because of how naive I was about the whole thing. I laid out all my favorite things, and I thought, let's just pick and choose all the best things about these different tools. The beautiful finish on the lip is not possible by just stamping something out on a manufacturing line. It's only possible by doing this stuff by hand.
Gabe Rudolph is the founder of Just Jura, a company that creates unique, high-quality kitchen utensils. In our conversation, Gabe shared his journey of going from working in restaurants to founding Just Jura. We talked about the inspiration behind his products, the challenges of manufacturing, the allure of antique cookware, and the importance of design, materials, and craftsmanship in creating beautiful and functional kitchen tools. We also discussed the unexpected viral video I posted about one of Gabe's spoons a couple months ago, and how Gabe handled the inventory and infrastructure challenges from that spike in demand. Enjoy the episode. Gabe, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to chat about all things Just Jura today. But before we get into the business, the products, your spoon, your spatula, talk to me about how you first got into cooking.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. This is super fun, and I really appreciate the video that you made on us. As a person that struggles with marketing and sort of describing why the stuff that we make is interesting, or anyone would want to buy it. It was great to have someone else do that for us. So I appreciate that.
Of course, it was fun.
Yeah, how did I get started?
Yeah.
So my primary job was cooking in restaurants, commercial restaurants. And that's what I did for a really long time in San Francisco and LA. And I did a bit of traveling around Europe and Japan as well. And yeah, this Just Jura really got started because of, probably out of boredom. It was something like I was probably, peeling a case of onions or picking parsley or something like that in the kitchen hours into a shift. And, you end up just talking or chatting or spacing out and come up with weird ideas. And that's really how it started. And it's super common in the cooking world for people to be into antique cookware and, old French copper pots or terrine pans or spoons or weird kind of old flea market kind of stuff that wasn't made anymore. And that was super common. When you travel, you work at different restaurants, there's always people that have, this junky bag, old plastic bag of all these weird, cool spoons or knives or whatever it is. And it sort of hit me how strange that was, that, if you're into fashion or if you were into music or something like that, there are all these really cool products and niche brands that are making things for their world. And really all I saw was an incredible market of high-end Japanese knives and a bunch of brands making 8-inch, 10-inch, and 12-inch stainless clad pens. A ton of those companies. But I saw this huge market of which I was a customer, and I just felt like there weren't I didn't have a ton of options. I thought that was interesting that we were all going to flea markets or weird old kind of like junk stores to find old, like I said, pots or weird, cool slotted spoons and things like that. So I think the project began as only these kind of things can, which is super naively and without much planning, and it just sort of snowballed.
What is it about old cookware or utensils that's so special? And why did we get to the point where, if we have all these old things that people had been making 50, 100 years ago, why are those things no longer being made?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a crazy complex sort of like a economic geopolitical answer, but maybe the simple thing is that things are just manufacturing has just changed a ton. And the materials and the way that those materials were fabricated are just not made anymore. A ton of the old flatware that you'll see was European, French, or English, or somewhere in the northeast of the US. And a lot of those steel manufacturers just went away. Um, Big businesses closed. And, machines became more efficient. And we just sort of stopped making things the way that we made things. It's the same reason why people like to go and find old Levi's 501s or things like that, is that, they were just made hardier and made in a different way. And it was easier to stamp a spoon out with the beautiful floral design and all of that stuff. And, it just costs a ton of money to make things that way now. And so, I think that there are tons of people that would want to do it if they could, but it just requires a ton of effort. It's super expensive.
Yeah.
I wish that I could explain that in a concise way to when people say, why should I pay $25 for a spoon? I wish that I could just sort of beam a 10-second video to explain why.
Yeah. When you look at older and like vintage products, whether it's cookware or utensils, are you more drawn to some of the design features, some of the floral patterns, or some of the like unique stylistic features? Or do you also find that you're really appreciating the functional additions that these older spoons and older cookware had that the newer stuff no longer has?
Yeah, it's sometimes it's functional, and a lot of times it's aesthetic. It's the beauty of holding an old thing that has clearly has tarnish or patina, and that I happen to be a person that loves that kind of stuff. An old pan, or a beautiful old knife with a ton of patina. And I love the patterns and all of the things that come with finding antique utensils. Now, the only thing is that sometimes you would get a really cool looking spoon, but it would be maybe a bit clunky, or the lid would be thick, or it would be this sort of weird old cast soup spoon or something like that. So, the core of the spoon product, which was the first one that we came out with, was, okay, let's take the aesthetics, that feel that you get when you hold an old, cool piece of flatware, and add functionality on top of that. So a great spoon that I can use everyday cooking that functions really well, but doesn't feel super new and shiny and commercial and sterile. It's really, a common practice in design, I guess, which is combining function and aesthetics.
Right. Now, one thing that I noticed immediately on Just Jura's site is your Just Jura utensils. You sell utensils, and most cookware products and brands that I've seen or I had seen up until then, they sell pots and pans and bigger purchase items, things that someone might spend a couple $100 on a set of pots and pans, and then they'll kind of tack on some spoons or some kind of spatula at the end as like an upsell almost. How did you think about starting this utensil company without having that advantage of, oh, we can depend on a bunch of people wanting to buy our pots and pans and then upsell them on spoons. You're just having to directly sell a spoon to someone, and you have to convince them that they need your spoon. How'd you come up
Yeah.
with that?
Yeah, you're right. It's funny. It is typically more of an accessory or an afterthought. And I wish I could tell you that there was some grand business plan. But I think if you came to someone with this business proposal today, they would probably tell you that it's not a great idea. And I definitely the people close to me in my life who I told I'm working on a project, I want to make, maybe spoons or tweezers or something like that, and people go, you know. So it really did start as a project. Like I was almost too afraid to take it seriously because it sounded like a bad idea. It sounded
Right.
like a bad business idea. But I think that's what has ended up actually being beneficial to us, is that we're so niche, that able to sort of commit to the fact that this is what we're selling. We're selling kind of small tools, flatware. And it's enabled me to focus. And I think that's what I've always appreciated about chefs who I admire. And especially when you go to Japan and you see these small shops that only specialize in one or two things, is focus. I really admire focus. And it's been super hard for me because I'm actually not a focused person, personality wise, in my life. And so it's been a really cool challenge to say, well, shit, like, God, it would be so cool to make a copper pan, and it would be so cool to go to Japan and make a knife, and we could do aprons, all this shit. And it's been a big challenge, but ultimately, I think beneficial, which is had to focus. It's super niche. And I guess on some level, these days, there are people who are appreciative of that. And I'm so grateful. Sometimes I do ask myself that same question that you just asked. And yeah, I wonder how we're still going.
Uh, I think the internet is a real great enabler of this stuff where you may think an idea is so niche, like, if you had spoken to maybe the 100 people that are friends and family and kind of, that you bump into on a daily basis in your life, they might have all thought, wow, this is a crazy idea. This isn't going to work. But because you're only looking at a pool of 100 people. But when you put this on the internet and you got 8 billion people, there's a lot of people just like you that have that same interest. And it's cool to see that you can kind of go really deep down any rabbit hole. Like, there are so many quirky and interesting products that you never think would make a good business, but you find there's some guy who's making like a bunch of them and has been doing it for 30 years and has turned it into a business.
Yeah,
So it's pretty
definitely.
cool. I think the
Yeah,
internet's,
I will say that something that I look to as an industry that I look to as a beacon is coffee.
mm,
Um, there are a ton of people, 3D printing cone filters that, they sell 150 of, and they do a drop or something like that. And it's a super, super passionate community. And I looked to coffee a lot in the beginning of Just Jura, because it reminded me a lot of the cooking industry, and that you have these super, super passionate people that clearly, they are that niche market that you're talking about. Like, I was my first customer. I wanted something like this to exist. I knew that there was a small market for it. I just, like you said, being able to connect to so many of those people across the country and the world has been the big surprise. And yeah, it is so cool that the market is configured that way now.
yeah. So the spoon was your first product. Was there a particularly bad experience with another spoon that made you go, okay, I just got to jump right in and make this right now? Or was it just kind of like a slow burn where it built up and you had this idea and you're like, I should probably do it at some point, and just went for it?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't say that it was born out of frustration. It was more um um almost that there really is. Have you heard of the Coon spoon, the gray Coon spoon?
Yes.
So that was actually what I was most fascinated by, is that you go anywhere in the country and sometimes even outside of the country. I'm sure Canada as well. I don't know what how the Coon spoon is distributed in Canada, but you go almost anywhere in the US and most serious professional cooks will have a Coon spoon. And I was fascinated by that. Like there's no competition across the board. Everyone has that spoon and it's perfect. It's an incredible spoon. So it wasn't one of those classic company founding stories where I can make it better. Like I didn't want to touch that at all because it's perfect and everyone agrees on that. What I did find interesting is, well, why can't there be some other kind of spoon that exists in the market? I mean, anyone who is a Coon spoon enthusiast will tell you that our spoon is nothing like it in any way. But I just wanted to participate in that. It was more like, this is so cool. Just like you said at the beginning, um, there, you know, there's so much room for new cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I wanted to participate in that. How is there only one spoon? I don't know,
Yeah. When you first decided to build the spoon, where did you go to seek inspiration for all the little features and little improvements that you made to the spoon that customers might not notice right away?
Yeah, I was at the time working super long hours in restaurants, and just as a way to decompress on my days off, I would go, try to find flea markets or go to antique shops and just look through things as a hobby. And so unintentionally, I was sort of creating a lexicon, a design lexicon of different features, both aesthetic and functional, that I liked about certain pieces that I would pick up, and then I would bring them to work and test them, totally unintentionally, kind of product testing, all these different products, or pieces, weird old cast spoons or plated silver spoons that I would find. Um, and when it actually came time to make my own, I realized that I laid out all my favorite things, and I thought, let's just pick and choose all the best things about these different tools. So, wow, this cool old French spoon has a perfectly tapered tip that every time I'm plating that one dish, the sauce just comes out perfectly. And then when I stop pouring, there's no extra drop. It's just like, it's almost mechanical. How do they do that? So let's look at that. And then there's this other one that one time I wanted to see how much volume was in it, and I took a tablespoon and poured a tablespoon in, and it was almost an exact tablespoon. I wonder if someone designed that into that, or is it a coincidence? And it's just like nerding out, starting to think about all the features, what you love about things, and then taking those features and compounding them into one product. It's like if you were to make a shoe or something, you might look at all of your favorite shoes and start to ask deeper questions than than you might normally about, you know.
Yeah. Did you have any manufacturing experience at this point? Like you have all these ideas of like, I think this might be nice, or I tested this in this other product, it worked really well. But when you put all those together and then you actually decide to go out and build a product, there's like a major leap there, right? It's not just like I have the design in my head. It's like I have to turn this into a physical product and ship it to people all over the world. How did
Yeah,
that process happen?
it was a full year of failing.
Really?
Cold emails, no one responding, zero manufacturing experience. I mean, this is again like one of those things where if I had known how difficult it was going to be, or if someone told me, I wouldn't have started at all. This only could have happened because of how naive I was about the whole thing. Um, so yeah, what I would do is just sort of go deep into the internet and try and find manufacturers. I started in England, went to Germany, and eventually obviously figured out that there's a huge steel industry in Japan. Um, yeah, cold emails and not understanding that most manufacturers have minimum order quantities that are usually 10,000 plus pieces. And yeah, no knowledge. I thought I'll make 150 of these and sell them to my friends, and quickly found out that the only person that was willing to work with me was willing to go to 3,000 pieces, and they said normally it's 10,000, and I pleaded my case that I was starting a starting a company, and I promise I'll order more, which I think I thought was definitely a lie, but so I had to order 3,000 pieces and keep them in my attic. And I just thought, okay, I'll keep working and I'll sell these on the side for a couple years. And when they're gone, they're gone. And the power of my network and the passionate people in the cooking industry, which we sold all of those in about 10 weeks.
Amazing.
And the project kind of overnight became a potential business.
Yeah.
So no planning. I was totally blindsided.
Yeah. What about the process of going from I imagine you had some notes, or you kind of did like a digital design of like the product you wanted to see. How did you transfer that to the physical world? Did the manufacturer get all those details right? Was there like a long back and forth process of, you receiving a first sample and then they say, oh, well, we couldn't do this the way you wanted it. How did that process on?
Yeah, I worked with friend that I had met who was a furniture designer, and she lives in Copenhagen. And I sort of had sketches and ideas, and I asked, we worked together to come up with, what they call like construction drawings or manufacturer drawings, which are that, you may have an idea for a shape and a look, and you usually work with an engineer to make sure that it's actually that, to create a technical drawing that a manufacturer can reproduce or fabricate. Um, and that was a super interesting lesson for me, which is that we were working all digitally in Rhino, which is an architectural software, engineering software. And I was really pushing the handle of the spoon to be super thin, it's sleek, streamlined. And when we got our first sample, it was like you could just barely put any pressure on it, and the whole handle bent. So that was a super cool lesson, is that like you can get really wrapped up in designing inside of your computer, and the physics of actual real objects don't translate at all inside of design software. And so that really freaked me out because I thought it was perfect. And we got, we paid for tooling and we paid for machining, and we got a sample that was unusable. So that was another huge setback after a year of cold emailing and just thinking there's no way we're ever even going to get a single piece of this to be made. The sample came and it was just like a total nightmare.
Yeah.
So that was again 3 to 6 months. So another huge lesson, which is that, I now, every new product that we make, I work directly with the factory first before, like, do you think that you can make it like this? Instead of just sort of going for it.
Yeah.
All things that I had no idea how to do. And so, yeah, um, that was a huge surprise. Yeah.
Right. Now you have a spatula, you have tweezers. I think you have a couple other products on your site now. Are you mostly trying to work with that same factory and kind of like build a process where you can kind of reliably come up with a new idea, get it to the factory, and have them produce it in that same format? Or are you kind of branching out and having to find new factories for all your different products?
Yeah. After the success of those spoons, I went to Japan and sort of took a tour of two big areas northwest of Tokyo. It's generally called the Niigata Prefecture, and there's two cities. There's Tsubame and Sanjo City, and the state has sort of combined them into this manufacturing area, and they call it Tsubame Sanjo. Um, it's about an hour and a half, 2 hour train from Tokyo, and all of the premier steel manufacturers are there. So knives, golf clubs, pots and pans, flatware, all that stuff. So it's so fun to take a tour and go around to these. They have a cultural museum of all the things that they produce there, and super cool. So I went because I knew I wanted to make more stuff, but I wanted to meet all of these different small manufacturers. I mean, that's what Japan is all about, is small business. What I also learned, which is super interesting, is that they're big on collaboration between businesses. So you might get a teapot made in Tsubame Sanjo, and the handle will be made by one manufacturer. The body of the kettle will be made by one manufacturer. The spout will be made by another, and the wood trivet that comes in the box is made by another. So they are big on collaboration between businesses. So that's what I discovered when I went there, and I ended up meeting a bunch of different small family businesses that now make different pieces that we produce. So the spatula, the wooden handle is made by a wood maker. The steel piece of the spatula is made by a steel manufacturer. Spoon is made by people that specialize in flatware. The tweezers are made by people who make chopsticks and tongs and those kinds of things. So, and most of the time it's 5 or 6 people working in small factories on these really, really cool old presses that they've kept in beautiful condition, that arrived probably shortly after the Second World War.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So it's so cool to visit there, and they're just incredible people to work with, because any detail that you care a lot about, they will care just as much. And speaking to people who manufacture in other countries, it's not always the case.
Right. Now, on your site, there's a number of different materials that I see in your products. I think you have steel, I think you have gold, you have wood, and I think you have a ceramic product as well. Can you talk to me about the importance of those materials? Why is the spoon, why a stainless steel and a gold version? Why have the wood handle on the spatula instead of a plastic one? I'd love to hear more about the material side of it.
Yeah, everything comes from a love of aesthetics, and over time, as the company has grown, a love of Japanese design aesthetics, because that is ultimately where everything is fabricated, and I do like to have some kind of reference to Japan in all of the products. The first couple years, I was super committed to having the line just be all steel, in this sort of like brutalist, shiny chrome kind of, everything is just like a steel outline with nothing. And that was really fun. And at a certain point, I decided it would be fun to branch out into maybe more warm materials like wood or ceramics. And yeah, I love touching things and holding things. I'm a super tactile person. And so to get an opportunity to work with wood or work with a ceramicist was just too cool to pass up. Um, in the spatula's case, I, was looking at Japanese knives and those beautiful eight-sided or sometimes six-sided wooden handles and how good they feel to hold, and how beautiful they are to look at, especially compared to a Western sort of German style knife. And I thought, well, it's funny because all of the spatulas actually have either cast silicone or wood handles that are quite flat. Um, Super simple. What if we took the Japanese knife handle and put it attached it to a spatula? And I was really excited by the results. Um, so yeah, I guess to answer your question, what began as a firm commitment on just making steel products has sort of branched out into different materials, and that's been super fulfilling. Even though every time you work with a new material, it's a new challenge. Um, yeah.
Have you noticed any particular materials that are way harder to work with than you expected, or that like you come with a design and you say, hey, let's build this, and they go, not with this material, you can't do it?
Yeah, I mean, going from steel to wood was a huge challenge. Um, I think I over designed the wood handle initially because I was used to adding components and just being able to create a die and stamp it out of a steel sheet and then, be able to bend it or run it on a lathe or all of these different things. And of course, wood is much softer and has, uh, you know, you're not able to push the tolerance as much because if you get to a certain point, the wood will just split, which is what happened to the first couple prototypes of the spatula's handle. Is that they called me and they just said it's just splitting. We just can't do it. Because I wanted a rivetless wood handle where the spatula would just snap into you would be able to essentially hammer the steel piece into a tapering wood handle. So it would
Almost like a mortise and tenon, like a
yeah,
joint. Yeah.
totally. And every time it would get to a certain point, the wood would just split.
Yeah.
So, that was sort of a really cool, humbling challenge, which is that you have this beautiful natural material and you actually have to kind of listen to the wood instead of trying to impose your will on the wood. So I'm happy that it worked out the way that it worked out, even though I still do have dreams of making a totally rivetless handle. But
Yeah. I think that your spoon is hand finished as well. It has this like matte texture to it. Can you talk to me about the finishing step? Because I think that's a piece that I know before I had looked through your site and found the spoon, I would never have noticed that in a spoon. I would look at a spoon and I'd say, yep, that's a steel spoon, that's a steel spoon. But the texture on the spoon would have never crossed my mind to consider. Why is that so important to the spoon? Or to your spoon?
yeah, it's it definitely comes from old silver plated antique spoons that just hadn't been polished in probably decades, that have this rough matte finish that people now associate with antique spoons. I wanted to go for that. And I also really, really didn't want a shiny, polished look because I found that to be sort of sterile. And often you would get a beautiful, polished piece of steel, and after a couple uses, or every time you would touch it, it would look smudged, or if you used the wrong side of the sponge, it would get scratched. And so there was a utilitarian aspect to that where I thought, it will look beautiful years from now and it'll look pretty similar to the way it was when you buy it, instead of having this beautiful shiny object out of the box that just only sort of degrades aesthetically over time.
Right. And you'd almost be afraid to touch the polished one. The moment you
Yeah,
put fingerprint on it, it's it's getting worse from
Right.
that point on.
Totally. Yeah. So, um, the spoon itself, I mean, goes through a ton of steps. Obviously, the silhouette itself, we have to build tooling for that. Everything that you cut out of a steel sheet has to be your shape, or your silhouette has to be machined and tooled so that a press can stamp out that shape. So anything that you do in steel manufacturing is not off the shelf. If you want to make something that's yours, it's bespoke, and all of the tooling that is made um, to fabricate that is bespoke as well, which is something that I didn't know and that I don't think is talked about, is that um, you kind of have to make the manufacturing tools before you can do anything, which is a whole other step. It's like making 3 products to make your product.
Right.
Um, so the silhouette is stamped, but it's just a 2-dimensional, almost flat object at that point. Now you go to the second step, where you have to create depth in the spoon's well itself. So that's a whole other step where you get this slow press that creates a depression and adds dimensionality to this just sort of 2-dimensional stamped silhouette. Then it has to get deburred, because once steel is cut, it has all these really rough, sharp edges. So all of the edges and the outside of the silhouette has to be deburred. So it's tumbled in this really cool machine that has these tiny stone ceramic pellets. And so instead of, running it on, I don't know, like a traditional deburring machine, they just get tumbled in this huge, cool machine. Once those are taken out, they're run by hand on this really cool lathe. I have videos of them doing it in Japan, and it's operated by your foot, and you run the motor, and so that's how we get these the beautiful finish on the lip. Is not possible by just stamping something out on a manufacturing line. It's only possible by doing this stuff by hand, and I mean, that's the coolest part for me.
Yeah. And that's something that I never would have even considered. Like, even, I feel like I've now, since getting the spoon, since testing it out, I've done more research into spoons, but even just hearing you say all that, like, I wouldn't have considered all those manufacturing steps. I just assumed it was some kind of stamp process and then some hand finishing at the end, but it's really difficult to conceptualize how the spoon comes together until you hear the actual story of it. Or better yet, maybe, make a trip to Japan and I go and actually see a factory and watch it happen. But
For
it's really
sure.
cool to think that, like, the simplest product imaginable, a spoon, could have so many complicated steps to it, and it's like it's a real work of art, and it only comes together when someone with your passion and your persistence spends a year cold emailing someone and eventually finds the correct factory to do the process, and then modifies the design to make it a little thicker because the handle's not going to hold up. And then, that whole process, I think, is a really, it's a challenge. And it shows that you guys put a ton of work into this when the finished product is here. But sometimes it's easy to forget that there's like a whole manufacturing process behind every single product that we buy.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk specifically about this spoon video. So for anyone who doesn't have context, any of the listeners, on August's YouTube channel, I guess it was early October or something, you had sent me the spoon, and I made a video kind of reviewing it, and I posted it, and I sent you a link, and I said, hey, check it out, here you go. And I don't think either one of us really thought much of it on the first day or two. And then like 3 or 4 days in, picked up a lot of views. I think either I emailed you or you emailed me, and we were like, what's happening? And like both of us were kind of surprised of like, how did this thing get like 100,000 views? And then the next day it was like 500,000. The next day it was like 1 million. The next day it was like
And then I see a bunch of comments from people saying, oh no, the spoon's sold out now. And so I see on your site, he's like, okay, we're sold out for a little while. We're getting a new batch soon. But like totally unexpected, I think for both of us that a video about a spoon would get, I don't know, I think it's at like 8 million views now. And when I look at all the other 20 or 30 videos that August has published to date, I think the next most popular is like a 25,000 view video. So this is like 99% of all views for my channel has come from this spoon. I myself had this experience of like watching these numbers go up, the view numbers, but I imagine you had a totally different experience being on the merchant side and being, you're now responsible for fulfilling a bunch of these orders, and you now have, the inventory sold out and you got to get more. Can you walk me through the process of, or the kind of events of the last couple of months when that video went up? What was it like getting your existing inventory out the door to customers, stocking? How do you get in touch with the manufacturers to did you have to expedite, some kind of manufacturing to make sure you got stuff out for Black Friday and the Christmas season? Cause it was the beginning of October. So it was kind of this is the hot time for all merchants to sell their goods. So I imagine it was quite stressful.
Yeah. I mean, the really short, simple answer is that on almost every level, we didn't have the infrastructure to handle that kind of volume. So that was really fun. The back end of my site was barely handling the amount of people that were coming to the site and ordering. So we had a couple minor crashes that made things really stressful. But overall, it was so cool to watch, because I had sort of just been sitting in this niche world for a while where I did small runs of products and was always super interested in keeping the sort of lowest viable business model. I mean, I worked out of my attic for 2 years, getting commercial UPS vehicles backing into our driveway. And I was doing, customer service, sales, shipping, and packing, and all of that for as long as I possibly could until I couldn't anymore. And then it was time to get an office and hire people and things like that. So I've always been very sort of insistent about operating the smallest viable business model, just because that's how I like to do it, keep it contained. So yeah, so what you said, there's almost 8 million views now, and it felt like it was something like 500,000 or 1 million views a day for a certain point where it was just getting crazier and crazier, and watching these people come to our site. Yeah, I mean, we only have 1,000 square foot office, so it's not like we're in this huge fulfillment center just like with cranes or dollies or any, electric dollies or anything like that. We're packing all this stuff by hand in boxes. It's just me and 2 other guys in San Francisco. So it was crazy. We're not used to that kind of volume at all, or being exposed to a sort of mass audience like what I assume people were finding through YouTube's Explore page or something like that. I wish I knew why it was that particular video of yours was so interesting to people.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm proud of our work, and I think you do an amazing job with your videos. You would think that a lot of your other videos would get the same kind of attention. I wish we knew what that was. But yeah, it's been really, really tough to keep up with inventory because, again, I've never been the kind of person that plans for inventory. We just have our drops and our stock for each season, and usually things just, will sell out slowly, and it is the way that it is because I work, like we were talking about earlier, I work with small companies, And so they're not the kind of people that you can say, we need 25,000 units for next quarter. Like everything is done really slowly and in small runs. So that sort of tested the limits of what exactly this project is, because I couldn't turn around and go to these small family companies and be like, there's a couple 100,000 people on my website. What can we do? And they just said nothing. We can just keep doing what we've been doing, and it's going to happen in the time that it's going to happen, which is what I love about Japanese manufacturing, is that it is totally not something where you can pressure them into doing things that they're not interested in doing because they want to keep the quality as high as possible. And I've been there and I've seen it the way that they do it, and there's just no way to do it quickly. So I think while it was difficult to have so much inbound of people all over the world just wanting to get their hands on our stuff, and how badly I wanted to give that to them, but having to sort of reconcile with the fact that I've committed to this style of manufacturing and this style of business, which is small and slow.
Yeah.
So that's been a really it's been a really cool last couple months, because the attention is amazing, but the infrastructure isn't there. And I've had to ask myself a lot of difficult questions, which is it time to get a bigger office? Should we try and find people who can, make larger batches or something like that? And I think I've come down to the answer being no, because I think that's what I love about this, is that we are niche, we are small, and those are the businesses that I respect and love. So it's tough, because I do want way more people to have access to our stuff. I want this stuff to be accessible, because I love sharing our products with people. It's a really difficult game to play, that balance.
I think I often don't appreciate how hard it is to make a new thing, and to watch you kind of like sell out, and you're out of inventory. What do you do? Like, to watch that process, even though I'm not fully responsible for producing more spoons, I'm seeing you, and it's like you're 1 degree away from me, and I'm now like, I feel a little bit of that stress, I guess, and I kind of recognize that it's not as easy as like if my website had too many visitors, I just get a few more servers, and it's like, okay, great, problem solved. If I need to make more spoons, they have to be made. You can't just like flick a switch. You can't. It's not just like it just doesn't work like that. So I think it's like a really difficult problem for merchants to solve in general, but I think it's being amplified by social media, in the sense that now everything is algorithmic. It's not like my followers or subscribers saw that video, because I barely had any at the time. It's like YouTube just decided that video should go in front of everyone, or everyone who likes cooking. And now all these people who I didn't even know were part of my audience are now seeing it. And then you're stuck with, now we have this big problem of, how do we fulfill all these orders? And so I wonder how merchants of all kinds are going to have to adapt to this algorithmic social era, and recognize that on any given day, any merchant could have one of their products go viral for a good reason or for a bad reason, and could be just like totally out of stock in the morning, and like full panic mode. What do we do?
Yeah.
How do we solve this?
For sure. I've been lucky in that I've had kind of one type of these events a year since I started 4 years ago, and they've been small in comparison to the volume that your video created, but I did have a little bit of experience in that feeling of virality. And it was always an opportunity to sort of level up. I mean, like I used to just take all of my packages to the post office and hand deliver them, and there came a point where the guy at my local post office looked at me and he was like, you can't do this anymore. And that was like sort of it was like, oh shit, okay, well, I have to figure out another solution. And then there was, you know, a time where I got a delivery from UPS into my garage, and I couldn't fit all of the pallets into my garage, and this poor guy was trying to get his massive commercial vehicle to fit in my driveway, you know, and that was another sort of interesting turning point that like made me think about what direction the business was going. And it's always really tough, and it always requires a lot of reflection. And I think I agree with you in that there's a lot to think about what it means to be an online retailer, a merchant that does all of their business online. As a person who loves brick and mortar shops, like I love going to my butcher and I love going to my coffee shop. You know, it's a totally different experience to go in and talk to someone. You know, you wouldn't go to your coffee shop and say, why are you out of beans? You know, they'd be like, well, you see, we only roast so many and we got really busy. It's the holidays and there's no more bags left. You would sort of just turn around and walk home. But I think that there is a bit of a disconnect, and I have it too, where you go online and you add to cart and kind of forget, like you said, that, you know, when we're sold out and we have to restock all of these spoons, there's a whole chain of events that requires a ton of human beings. And that's hard to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think I've thought about it a lot. I don't know if the solution is to make sure that you're ready for another viral event. I think that, you know, I almost want to double down and continue to be the best small business that we can be, instead of forcing ourselves to adapt to an audience that is ever growing.
Yeah.
I think that's really hard. I mean, as a person coming from restaurants, restaurants don't scale. You get busy and you just can only do what you can do. And I think that there was something always really, really satisfying about being able to exist in this totally contained space. This is all we can do within this space, but it's the best that we can do. You know, you can't serve 10,000 people a night in a restaurant, you know, and I think that that's kind of beautiful. Like, that is why it's special, is that it can exist at scale. And that's why there's a difference between fast food and going out and getting a really good burger, you know?
Right. You know, the disconnect you mentioned between products that are sold online and products that are sold in person is interesting. It sort of reminds me of when I see a site and it's like out of stock, but it never says, you know, why or when it's coming back. Sometimes it says when it's coming back, but it rarely says like why, or it rarely shines a light on the process that is actually required to build the thing. I wonder if there's a parallel here to something like airline, when you hear like flight delayed, and if there's no reason given, you're like immediately frustrated. You're like, why is my flight delayed? When's it going to come back? Like, when can I get to my destination? But when you hear someone say, you know, your flight's delayed 10 minutes, there's a fueling issue, we're resolving it or whatever, like you're immediately put at peace a little bit at least. And you go, okay, it's 10-minute wait. I understand why. I understand the fuel needs to go in order for us to fly. And
yeah, we need fuel. That's okay. I can wait for that. Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing you can explain when you're at a coffee shop, but it's difficult to explain sometimes with the website builders and some of the tools that people have to sell their products online. Is like, I wonder if people start building websites saying like, we're currently harvesting some beans for our coffee in Guatemala or wherever I'm getting the coffee beans from, El Salvador, and they're headed on a truck and they'll be there in 4 days, but sorry, you can't buy any today. Maybe that's something that can kind of ease that burden for people.
Absolutely. I agree. I mean, I think that's a really fun user experience challenge. Softening the sold out blow.
Yeah.
I got an opportunity to speak to a ton of people over email and Instagram DM, and most of the time it starts out with frustration, and then you say, hey, we're just two people here. We don't make a ton of stuff, but we're trying to get it back as soon as possible, and I'll send out an email as soon as we have it back. I think that 99.9% of people are so understanding and so cool about that once you have that conversation. Even though, like, I wish that I could give everyone what they want, that opportunity to speak to people and at least explain a little bit of the story, even though it's not under great circumstances. I wish I could just sell them one of our products. That would be the best case scenario. But it's been a cool opportunity to have conversations with people and at least explain this story a little bit more.
For sure. So, give me a brief background on just the timeline for Just Jura. So you said you started a few years ago. What year was it? 2022?
If you want to start from when I started emailing manufacturers, it was 2019.
2019. Okay. So you've been at this now for 5 years of your energy, but then, production maybe 2020 or 2021?
2021, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And right now you got a couple of hires, you said. Is there, and the plan is to kind of keep this as like a family style business, a small business, and kind of like work on individual products as you come up with new ideas?
Yeah. I don't have a grand plan, because I just really enjoy the work, and my only plan is to keep making cool stuff that excites me. I've been thinking about collaborations a lot recently. We just did a ceramic collaboration with a ceramicist in Oakland. Those are those small fermentation jars that we put out, and that was so fun. And sort of scratched the itch of these year-long product cycles. That, you get a great idea and then you're only really able to share it with the world 12 to 16 months later. It can be hard sometimes. Or not hard, but, can be, you want a little, some fun, satisfying things in between there. But as far as plan for the business, honestly, I don't have one.
That's fair.
I'm just having fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's me and Jason and Luke. We're just three guys right now, and yeah, would not be able to do it without the two guys, because fulfillment and packing and shipping is a huge part of any business. And yeah.
Are there any products that
go ahead.
you have as like high priority? Like, I really want to try building this product, but maybe coming down the pipeline in the future?
It's hard not to think about knives. I love knives. I'm a collector of knives. I think they're beautiful. I just have so much respect for the craft that it's hard to imagine even dipping my toe into that, because especially in Japan, it goes beyond manufacturing. I mean, the knife making world there is cultural. Like, it's I don't know. I think about knives a lot, and I just don't know how I would get myself involved in that, because I would be really self-conscious about wanting to make it a great, respectful product of the that reflects the beauty of the craft. I guess in a lot of ways, a lot of the things that I choose to make, like cake testers, there's no reference point. So you can kind of get a little wacky and fun because there's sort of not that much to bounce it off of. So in that way, I think the knife is a big challenge, which is always on my mind. I just have to get to a place where I feel like I could do it in the best way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are there any really important business lessons or product lessons that you can share with the audience about, looking back now over the last few years, things you would have done differently, things you were like, that was really a bad decision and it set me back 6 months, or, things that you would improve if you were to do it all over again?
Yeah. I mean, I guess if I was speaking to myself 5 years ago, there's probably 10 pages worth of stuff. It'd be a long letter or a long conversation that I think you could never really prepare anyone for all of the different things that happen when you start a business, and that so much of it is failing and feeling like you don't know what you're doing. Um, um, it's almost like hard to separate that from the rest of the experience, because it feels like so much of the experience is freaking out and not knowing what you're doing. Like, it's hard to, that's the best part almost for me, that I don't know if I would want to avoid it, because it's what makes it satisfying. And yeah, again, like, I come from the cooking world, and the only way to learn is to suck and to fail every day, over and over and over again, and over and over again. So I think that cooking gave me persistence that I don't know I would have had otherwise. The two people that I have hired are from the restaurant world. And I think, if a young person came to me and said, I really want to start a business, I would say, go work in a restaurant for a year. Because I think that it's you can actually learn a ton about business working in a restaurant. I mean, you learn about margins, you learn about labor, you learn about material costs, which is, just food costs, and marketing. I think, like, a common thing in restaurants is wording on a menu. You can change the wording up on a dish, and something that didn't sell at all one night, you change the word from crunchy to crispy or something, or from poached to braised or something like that, and you're suddenly selling double the amount that you sold last night. That's like it. All these super interesting lessons, I think, all came from working in restaurants.
That's fascinating.
Hospitality, customer service, they all go hand in hand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really fascinating. Okay, I want to ask one final question. August is all about celebrating extraordinary products and the people who build them. Beyond the products you're building at Gestura, are there any other extraordinary products in your life? Any things that are particularly amazing or fun to use or inspiring that you pick up every day and look at it and go, wow, that's a really great product?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we spoke about coffee briefly the other day. I think I'm a bit of a coffee enthusiast, and I think that there are so many cool products out there right now, and small companies that are making cool things. I got way more into it after I started traveling in Japan, because they sort of out nerd everyone in the coffee space. But just the fact that you can engineer a cone filter that creates a whole different flavor profile in the coffee, whether something is conical or flat bottom, totally changes the taste and the experience of a coffee. Just blows my mind. So there's a ton of really, really cool products in the coffee space, from grinders to filters and kettles and all of these different things. I'm sort of super deep in the coffee world right now. And there's a lot of beautiful stuff. I'm really jealous of product designers in the coffee world right now. Like, I'm kind of dying to jump in.
Any particular brands you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah. I really like Origami, Japanese brand, and they make these amazing, it's sort of a cross between a conical and a flat bottom brewer. And they make their brewers in all of, I don't know if it's ceramic or if it's 3D printed, but they have this beautiful line of pastel finishes. So I have a pink one and a beautiful green one, and great example of something that looks really beautiful on your countertop and also just makes really great coffee. And that's totally what I'm about. So it's inspiring. It's inspiring to me.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Well, listen, thank you for taking the time to chat today. Thank you for building Just Jura. The products are amazing. I've got the spatula and the spoon. I may have to pick up a one of the ceramic jars at some point, but
Yeah, for sure.
thank you for everything you've done. And where can listeners go to learn more about you and Just Jura?
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you, Kevin, for highlighting us. It means a lot to get recognition for your work, and especially when it's done in a really great way like you do at August. So I really appreciate you and your work. And yeah, I mean, you can just go to justjurautensils.com. My email is on the site if you want to chat and ask any questions. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Thanks again for the time. Hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah, man.